Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The U.S. economy actually contracted in the first quarter. Will the administration avoid another recession by doing something with the books? Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is concerned about the ghost of 1937. Maury, tell the folks what the ghost of 1937 is.
The ghost of 1937 was an unfortunate setback for FDR, who basically did a good job of breaking the back of our Depression. When he got into the White House on March 4th, 1933, it's kind of ironic because Herbert Hoover, who was the president, was responsible to a certain extent because he was a protectionist.
Would you say he's one of the worst presidents that we ever had?
Yes, because we were going strong in the 1920s, and then, of course, we were calling loans from all over the world, and also he closed our ports to foreign goods, which some people say it's a good idea, but the other countries did the same thing to us, and that was one of the reasons we got about a 28% unemployment rate. So Roosevelt did a good job. He closed the banks, so got them reorganized. By 1937, we were coming out of the Depression. Not we were down from maybe 28% down to 12%. But we were going the right way.
In terms of unemployment, you mean?
In terms of unemployment, in terms of productivity, in terms of budget and the ability to...
And they probably didn't have 13 different lines of unemployment like we have today.
No. Also, remember, at that time, the budget was related to
the gold standard.
The gold standard, and the gold was frozen at the rate of $35 an ounce. So we had that as a leverage to maintain the budget in some sort of balance. But Roosevelt, after being reelected by a huge landslide in 1936, kind of became dictatorial in his attitudes. And he said, as far as I'm concerned, we are now going to increase taxes. We're going to put our country in a position where we will cut back on the budget of expenditures. He was prematurely and presumptuously cutting back this country while it was in the stage of getting out of a very deep depression. So the ghost of 1937 was a big mistake that Roosevelt made and that he suffered from.
But interest rates had played a part in that too, did they not?
Well, yes, because he started raising interest rates. He thought now that the depression was not going away, but it was going in the right direction. It was getting smaller. Now's the time to reverse and go back to the old ways. And what saved Roosevelt? The war. By 1939, Hitler was marching. He occupied France, he occupied Poland, Holland, and so on. So we became the arsenal for democracy. And you know what the ultimate irony of this is? If it hadn't been for the terrible depression which emptied our automobile factories making all kind of manufactured goods, we were able to bring in a tremendous amount of production of military equipment. Tanks, planes, guns, Liberty ships, things. If we were going full blast, we couldn't have done that. So ironically, the war gave America an opportunity to eliminate unemployment completely. We became a boom power overnight, fighting both Germany and Japan at the same time. And a lot of people don't realize we built up an air force like you wouldn't believe in a period of less than a year. We put women to work for the first time in our history by the millions. So this all came about in a very short period of time because we had the capacity for production, but because of the Depression, those places were standing empty, and people that were capable of working didn't have jobs.
So what is the Fed worried about? What do they want to avoid now with the ghost of 1937?
Well, what they want to avoid now is not repeated. If they, let's say, Yellen comes out and says, okay, we're going to start this whole idea of higher interest rates, and sometimes it gets out of hand. Right now, as we speak, Mortgage rates are already coming back up again. Not great. They were down as much as 3.5%. They're back to 4%, and you don't know where that's going to stop. So once you open up the cauldron and the ghosts come out, they come out pretty fast, and you have no control. And the Fed is still, as long as the Fed maintains a position with the banks, and the Fed has more control over the banks today than they've ever had, and if they show any sign, this is going to affect the stock and bond market, it's going to affect the banks are dying to raise their interest rates so they can make more money.
And it's going to affect our debt payments.
Oh, you made I'm glad you made that point, because one of the things with our $18 trillion debt today, we're paying very low interest rates, and it's not become the big picture, the big number that it could have been if we had, say, an interest rate of 6%. Right now, it's down around 2%. So we're able to carry this debt and not have it hanging over us as a sort of Damocles.
Now, speaking of the debt, for the last 90 days, the debt clock has remained at the exact same number, 18 point whatever trillion dollars. It's impossible. How do they manage to do that?
No, I think they've managed to do it by cutting our military in half.
No, but I'm saying the debt has remained exactly the same.
Oh, you mean as far as a number?
Right. It hasn't increased one dime in 90 days.
I don't pay any attention anymore. I get my own numbers from people that I know. And this idea of 5.6, forget about it. That comes out of the Commerce Department. And who do you think?
What's the real unemployment number? 13?
About 13%, yes. But it's really higher if you're talking about
underemployed.
I use the term labor force participation. It means there are millions and millions of people that are able to work. Now they may not want to work. They may, because they're getting paid off by the government, the freebies that the government is handing out. But we have a labor force participation rate that's down around 62.5%, which means 38% are part of the potential workforce. Now, I'm not saying that means we have a 38% rate unemployment, but when we were going strong from the middle 80s to the first part of this century, it was up around 82%. So you had an 18% labor force participation. I never used anything else but labor force participation.
Speaking of the Fed, how much do you think they're going to be looking at QE4, which would be quantitative easing,
No.
printing more money, digitizing, monetizing the debt?
No, actually, we have more money than money is there. The bottom line of big corporations today has never had more liquidity than it has today. The Fed has done a very good job of raising the standards for the banks and putting them to a test as to do they have enough money, enough capital in order to support their activities. And they have more than enough. The banks are dying to lend more money, and to the point where now Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are buying a house with 3% down. The ironic thing is there aren't a lot of takers, because the whole basic attitude toward owning a house today is not what it was before the recession. Today people see it as a liability, not as an asset.
They may not have a job next year.
Or in order to get a job, you may have to fly to the other part of the country. The mentality has changed. It used to be, starting with the Second War, and the GIs coming home, and the GI Bill of Rights, which was one of the great things that came out of the Roosevelt administration, I think was wonderful. But then the house became a major asset for most middle-class people. And one of the reasons was the prices kept going up all over the last 50 years. When we were flipping, I guess is a term that was used, to flip a house, you knew you were going to make money. So you either stayed in it for the rest of your life, or you flipped and got a bigger house. Well, now that doesn't exist today. Sure, there's as we speak, they're talking about 1 million new housing elements this year. I can guarantee you that much of those are going to be rentals and lease deals, not owned by somebody who has to sign off on a mortgage. And if the mortgage goes up, it's going to get worse.
The first quarter, anytime the government puts out statistics, it always gets revised down when everyone's forgotten about it. So the first quarter they came out and said that we actually expanded. It wasn't big, but we had an expansion. Now we find out we didn't. We contracted. Will this administration go to any length to avoid a second quarter contraction, which would technically mean a recession?
Well, first, I don't think this administration cares anymore because it's coming to an end. Secondly,
Is it?
Well, come on. I mean, let's not get
I'm
into
not conspiratorial on you, but
I know. Okay, but let's just follow my line of thinking here. The fact is that the numbers don't mean anything anymore because, for instance, we will not know what we did in the first quarter until the end of the second quarter because they come in little bits and pieces. You know, even though I consider myself an outstanding economic analyst, I still don't understand why they can't come up with these numbers faster. It's a piecemeal. You know, you hear, for instance, exports were up, then they were down. So going back to your point, the very nature of the way they're doing this leaves yourself open to manipulation.
Absolutely. That's an excellent way to put it. That's exactly what I was asking.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, I read this stuff now 3 or 4 hours a day, and I've gotten pretty good at it because I research it, and I actually made some good contacts. And these people the energy guys, they don't know much. They're told what to do. They have if it's something unpleasant, it's not lying. It's distorting. It's changing, using manipulating and changing standards.
We need to take a quick break. If you'd like to email us with comments or catch a segment that you missed, just go to our website, theworldreport.org. You can also follow Maury on Twitter. He's a Twitter guy now, at @Beschloss. Our quote of the day: a hippie is someone who looks like Tarzan, walks like Jane, and smells like cheetah. Do you know who said that?
No.
The Gipper, Ronald Reagan.